This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right,
it is not. It is a receiver of thought. Because love is my first technique.
it's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles. Thank you for joining us today. And make sure you hit subscribe, whether you are listening to this on iTunes or Spotify. You never want to miss any Mile High tick, which also means you never want to miss Mile High Live. So make sure you hit register at riseuptomilehigh.com to join us in person at altitude this September 26th weekend, Mile High noon. And make sure you bring your cowboy or cowgirl hat and boots, because the theme is going to be country western for the movie High Noon. You get it? Noon, 12, it kind of goes together. So, and today I'm really grateful to have Dr. Ian Shtulman. He's one of my favorite people in chiropractic. He's a second generation chiropractor like me, Palm Beach County, Florida. He got the Life University Philosophy Distinction Award as a Diplomate in Pediatrics. He loves talking about perinatal care and pediatrics. And he's one of our speakers, as he said, fourth time being at Mile High. So really glad to have you there. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Ian.
Thank you so much for having me, Danny. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and glad you'll be coming from sea level, hot and sticky Florida, to altitude, okay, in September. I know Colorado is one of your favorite places, and before I get an interview, I'll tell you, it's one of your favorite places because of the scenery. And I have to say, if people come out, whether it's this year or any future year, you have to go do some scenery and visiting and seeing things. Spend an extra day, half day, and seeing some. Within half an hour, you can be somewhere in the mountains, and it's worth it to take that time. You need to get filled up professionally and personally. So, and Ian knows all about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about your career and your focus. First of all, how did you find yourself? I know you're a second generation chiropractor, but somewhere along the way, what inspired to say, hey, I want to help people in this way?
You know what's so funny is I grew up as a second generation chiropractor, but I didn't grow up firmly embedded in the chiropractic philosophy. And I was actually thinking about this last night of how important the philosophy is to motivate us to do what we do, because I grew up getting adjusted my entire life, but I got adjusted because that's what you do as a son of a chiropractor, not because my dad had any real strong understanding of why kids should be well adjusted throughout their development. And so I took it for granted. I didn't really understand the benefit of it. And I was in undergrad at University of Florida, and I was doing all of my pre-med stuff. I was planning to be an orthopedic surgeon. And it just so happened that as I was getting dropped off at school for my sophomore year, my dad had just gotten back from Total Solution. He had bought an Insight substation and, went to the mountaintop, as they said. And he got home excited about the philosophy of chiropractic for the first time in my life. And I said, I can notice this difference in him. And I said, well, what's going on? And as he drove up, back when cars still had CD players, he put in a lay lecture that he had written and recorded for his new patients. And it was all just inspired by his newfound understanding of philosophy.
Wow.
And that was my first time hearing about what made chiropractic a separate and distinct profession, right? What made us unique in not just how we apply our tools, but why we would even bother, right? And why it was so important. And all of a sudden, this light bulb just went off in my head, and I said, oh my gosh, this is why I have grown up differently than all my friends. This is something really special. Why haven't I known about this? And it was right then and there when I discovered the philosophy that I said, no, this is what I want to do. right? This is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. And so, I decided I was going to go to chiropractic school from that point.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll have to say similarly, my mom went to chiropractic school when I was a teen, and she took me to her chiropractor because she was doing prereqs and going to school. I didn't really know what she was doing. It may be part of the age, of where you are. You're not necessarily paying attention to exactly all the why. But when I started to hear the why from people that, she dragged me along to different chiropractic things, and I didn't necessarily really want to go. But then I heard it, I was like, oh, this is because I didn't have a direction professionally. And then I heard it, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I know, believe, my understanding of health and well-being, like foundationally, you can help people doing this. It sounds familiar. Like I was like, this would be something I could be passionate about and excited about. So we have similar paths there. And it's like a complete change of direction at that point, and it's really for you, how do you find it to be doing something each day that fills you with purpose?
There's something really special about getting to go to work and knowing that you're going to make an impact, right? I mean, I think ultimately, obviously everybody wants to provide for their family. They want to be able to fulfill their basic needs, but there's a certain point where you want to climb up that, Maslow's, hierarchy, right? You want to get to that self-actualization. And one of the things that I learned very early on, and something that's probably a universal feeling among chiropractors, is this calling to want to help people, to want to give back, to want to serve. And I know that I get to serve people in a really unique way, right? There's very few chiropractors in South Florida who are really that strongly connected to the philosophy, right? There's obviously phenomenal chiropractors who take care of people and help them with their, musculoskeletal pain, car accidents, sports injuries, and they do great work. So, some of my best friends, my dad practiced that way for years. But when you get to work, especially with pregnant women, with children, and you get to see what it's like providing chiropractic care and see how their life changes, and how just the introduction of this small little adjustive force helps to open up possibility for them. I'll give you a great example, and this is early on in my career. I was taking care of a family. There's two young kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And, as parents do, they see their kids benefiting from chiropractic and they say, all right, well, if I'm bringing them, I might as well start as well. Yes. And this particular mom didn't have any particular, issues or complaints, but we started adjusting her. And we get to the reassessment. So we're about 6 weeks in, we're doing her posture, her scans, we're doing all that stuff. And I don't know what made me ask it, but I'm looking at the reassessment form and I just say, all right, what has changed in your life that you haven't told me about yet? Right. And
right.
It was just
Great question.
Just open up the possibility.
Right.
And I saw her get really self-reflective in that moment. And she started to get choked up and she said, I started liking my daughter.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I thought that was such a profound moment because here's this mom who is doing all of the things she's supposed to do as a mom.
Right.
But the level of being, the level of being that loving, enjoying, connecting, right? That was something there was something interfering with that. And we could, take a step back and say that she was in this chronic fight or flight survival state and the adjustment restored autonomic balance and allowed her body. Or you could say the subluxation reconnected the physical with the spiritual and whatever it was, right? However you want to view chiropractic, the introduction of that adjustive force allowed her body to begin to love and enjoy and appreciate and spend time with her kids in a way that was not only fulfilling to her, but it was life transformative for her daughter, right? Imagine what it would be like growing up in a household where a parent tolerates you, but doesn't really enjoy or love you. And to have all of a sudden that switch, especially at an early age where you can really benefit from it. And I just realized this big picture, I said, gosh, man, imagine what it would be like if everybody in the world was able to love free of that subluxation and is able to appreciate and enjoy and start to develop relationships and connections and business deals and government policies and all of these things from a place of being free of subluxation. And it was just, this is it. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right. It's so amazing with that people want to put chiropractic into a pigeonholed back pain, neck pain, headache model, when things like that happen every day in chiropractic offices.
It's so funny about that because absolutely, chiropractic helps with musculoskeletal pain. Absolutely, if you have musculoskeletal pain, you should be under chiropractic care. Absolutely, it helps with car accidents and sports injuries. But my dad practiced in that model for 30 years. And it wasn't until like year 22 or 23 when he really started to have a justification for all these quote unquote miracles that was happening in his practice.
Right.
Because he would have the person who was suicidal who started getting adjusted and all of a sudden found a new lease on life. He had the woman who couldn't get pregnant who he started adjusting and she was able to get pregnant again. He had these experiences, but he never really had an understanding philosophically or scientifically on how what he was doing would have that effect. And when he started opening up his perspective and really examining what he did when he adjusted somebody, he realized that both from a philosophical and a scientific perspective, that all of these things weren't just happenstance. They weren't just a coincidence, right? As he used to joke, chiropractic is the leading cause of coincidences. It was that
I'm going to quote you on that.
No. Quote Howard Shtulman. He was able to have an explanation for why what he was doing was having this effect on people. So I have no problem when people go into practice every day and serve people in how they feel physically. But you should always be open to the possibility and the awareness that when you apply that adjustive force, when you do that adjustment, you're not just impacting how somebody feels, you're impacting their nervous system and how they perceive and respond and process to the world around them. And when you do that, yes, you're helping them feel better, but you're also changing their relationship with their spouse. You're changing their relationship with their kids. You're affecting how they understand the world around them and the choices they make and everything else that happens from that point forward. They will never be the same person after they've received that first adjustment.
Right. And, people take that for granted. They take that for granted so often. I love that leading reason of coincidence. That's classic. Okay, so now talking further about this, how did you end up having the focus of a children-focused practice? I know there's perinatal and pediatric, but that whole area.
Yeah. I was that weird guy in high school who was actually also a babysitter. And, I spent my summer interning at a daycare. I really just genuinely enjoy young kids. I think there's just something that's fun about them. I think there's no drama and there's just, I don't know. I've always enjoyed working with that population. And so when I started learning about pediatric chiropractic, I said, oh, this is really cool. This is what I want to do. But it wasn't until I heard Jeannie Ohm speak. And it was, fortunately for me, it was my first quarter at Life University. And Jeannie Ohm came down for one of their quarterly seminars. And I listened to her speak. And what she did was connect the philosophy of chiropractic to the anatomy and physiology of basic embryology and pregnancy and birth, and was able to so passionately and eloquently explain the role that we as chiropractors have on this mom, this developing baby, this relationship and this journey in birth. And she just painted this picture that I sat there for those 45 minutes and I walked out of there and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I don't, the kid stuff is great. Yeah. And I'll continue to do that. But bam, pregnancy, that's the full expression of the innate intelligence, right? Is this process of taking a single half cell from a sperm and a half cell from an egg to create one single human cell. And then that cell divides and divides and differentiates and differentiates. And we were able to grow this human being inside of us and then bring this baby out into the world and then feed this baby from our chest, and our body knows how to do all of this without us having to like go to school to learn how to do it. Like, if that's not the full expression of innate intelligence, I don't know what else is. It's just, to me, it's so unbelievable. It just doesn't seem like it should be possible, and yet it's so routine for fortunately so often at the time. And it was just so clear to me. It was like, listen, if chiropractic can have this impact on one person, imagine what happens when you adjust a pregnant person and change the internal environment for that developing baby. Right? Imagine what happens when you alter the birth process, and now both mom and baby are able to have less intervention and a smoother, easier birth. And that, now we know through epigenetics, actually primes that baby's nervous system and even genetic expression to process the world differently going forward. Right? Like, how cool is that? And we as a chiropractor, right, with just our pisiforms, have the opportunity to make those changes. And it was just, gosh, like, how could you not want to, serve in that area? So that's how I got into it. And I dove head deep. And it just so happened that when I graduated chiropractic school and moved to South Florida, there was a birth center that was opening up, and the midwife and the doula were looking for a chiropractor to join on the team. And here I was, this 25-year-old kid who just got married, didn't have kids. I had to grow a beard to look older so people wouldn't ask me how old I was. And I just came in and I started talking about chiropractic and pregnancy, and they decided to give me a chance and welcome me in. So, and that was kind of the start of this process.
Now, why the ICPA is very important to you.
Yes.
It's very important to the profession. Why, can you say more about why that organization is vital?
So, it's interesting because when I was in school, right, the ICPA was really the only professional organization that was, preaching the importance of perinatal and pediatric care. And the work that they've done over the last 3 decades has been so powerful. You're seeing all these other organizations pop up doing wonderful work, whether it's research or technique guidance or practice management, and all of that stuff is great. The reason why I always go back to the ICPA is because for the last 30 years, they've had one foundational mission. It's the chiropractic family wellness lifestyle, right? It's training doctors, it's educating the public, it is doing research as a nonprofit in ensuring that chiropractic remains accessible for pregnant and pediatric populations. And to me, I think there's something really just so pure about that, right? Like, none of the instructors, which I'm very grateful to be able to call myself now, none of the instructors for the ICPA do it because the ICPA pays well for teachers, right? We do it because we genuinely just want to share this mission. And what I love about the people within the ICPA, yourself included as a member, is that recognition that even if you don't have a pediatric and perinatal specific, specialized practice, you recognize the importance of why it needs to be accessible. You understand that your role as a member within the ICPA lifts up everybody within chiropractic around the world and opens up the door for more pregnant and pediatric patients to receive and benefit from chiropractic. So to me, I think the ICPA is just the benchmark for organizations. And obviously there's so many important things that other organizations do, whether it's getting in the realm of politics and protecting our rights state by state. But for me, it just fully aligns with my passion. And I think anybody, anywhere in the world who believes chiropractic should be available in pregnancy and pediatrics for family wellness should be a member of the ICPA. I just think it's so important to the work that they're doing as far as training chiropractors and performing research is so important to validate and protect our rights as chiropractors.
That's something that's vital, which is that it's one of the positions. It may not be in this wording per se, but it's one of the positions I know of the ICPA. In Colorado, we had some things with the state board, which happens in all states, and things with our state organization, which again is an issue at times in all states. So we're not, the only ones, right? And this is why we want to see people get involved at, state levels on boards and, in state organizations where we, by leadership and by force, like showing up at meetings, got the Colorado Chiropractic Association to adopt the position statement that it's of a standard of care, accepted standard of care, to take care of children, of minors, just because subluxations are in and of themselves a detriment in the absence of symptoms and diseases and conditions. And can you speak to why a position like that's important for chiropractors and chiropractic?
It's so incredibly important because, and I commend you and the Colorado delegation of making sure that you protect the rights within Colorado, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, I have a Colorado license.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
It's technically inactive, but it's one day when I retire and move out to practice part-time in Colorado, I've already got my license secured. But chiropractic around the world is under attack, and there has been this effort outside the profession and even within the profession to kind of position chiropractic as a subgroup of medicine, right?
Right.
It started initially by trying to label us as complementary and alternative, which means either we work alongside or we are an alternate, right? We work in lieu of. And neither of which is true, right? We're a separate and distinct profession that, regardless of whether you participate in medicine, regardless of whether you have a pediatrician, a primary care doctor, a physical therapist, acupuncturist, none of that matters, because none of those professions focus on the location analysis and correction of vertebral subluxation.
Right.
That's what we do. We're the only profession in the world that analyzes and adjusts subluxation. So, in that respect, it's so important to protect the rights of doing so purely for the perspective that subluxations have a deleterious effect on the quality of life, on the expression of the human potential. That in and of itself, being subluxated does not have to relate to a specific disease or condition to warrant being adjusted, to warrant addressing it and correcting it, right? Because without that, we're left in a position where we're trying to sell chiropractic as an alternative to conventional medical care when it comes to ear infections, colic, list A to Z, all of the different positions that we tend to communicate about chiropractic. But even that, we're trying to frame chiropractic in the context of allopathic care, of medicine.
Right.
Where if we simply talk about the impact that subluxation makes on the expression of innate intelligence, on the adaptability of our body, on how our nervous system processes and responds to the world around us, that in and of itself is important to protect our ability to analyze and correct subluxation. So it's so important that state organizations do that. And I know that's long been held the position of the ICPA is that regardless of disease or condition or age or anything else, if you're subluxated, you deserve to live a life free of subluxation.
Right. And this, it comes up in state boards where someone says on a board that may have a different point of view than what you and I have and what other chiropractors of our ilk that says, well, why are they taking care of this kid? They don't have headaches or they don't have any pain. Like, and that's the lack of headaches and the lack of back pain and the lack of neck pain. Does that mean we exclude, it doesn't mean we exclude this person from being someone who can benefit from chiropractic care.
I'll give you a great example of that. In South Florida, we have all these little communities that are like golf cart communities, right? And there was this mom who came in with her 2.5, 3-year-old boy, and they were riding along a golf cart, and he stuck his head outside, and it hit one of those concrete poles that help make sure cars don't drive into the entrance of Target. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And what the mom noticed is that over the course of the next couple of weeks, this little boy lost his words.
Oh, wow.
He stopped being responsive emotionally and stopped being affectionate. And he stopped making eye contact, and he became more and more immersed in his own world and less interactive with everything around him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could see where this is going, right? It's going towards like an autism diagnosis, and it's going towards, and the mom ends up coming to see me. And we said, she asked me, is there anything you can do? And I said, listen, I don't know what I can do for anything else, but I know if he's subluxated, correcting those subluxations will benefit him. To what extent, I don't know. I just know that he'll be better off being unsubluxated. And so we started adjusting him. And over the course of the next 3 months, he gradually regained all of those skills, affectionate, eye contact, communication. Now, obviously, this is like an extreme example. But the reason why I think this is so important is because this mom, before she brought her son to see me, brought him to her chiropractor. And her chiropractor said, well, he doesn't seem to be complaining of neck pain or headaches, so whatever hit him in the head must not be a chiropractic issue.
Right.
And the thing that's so frustrating about that is this is why philosophy is so important, is because your philosophy can either open up possibilities or it can shut down possibilities. And for this family, if it wasn't for this mom's determination to find, some hope, the philosophy of her chiropractor would have been very limited, and this child would have been locked in his current state. And I think it's really important that we recognize what we have and what's available, even if it's not how we choose to practice in a primary capacity.
Right. And so important. And that's the thing that happens. If they don't have a symptom, why are you taking care of them? And having that as a position in an organization is vital. The ICPA is similar position. Again, not necessarily worried the way I just said it. Similar positions, because then when someone has an issue, we see this in Colorado. I'm sure you've seen this in other state organizations. This is part of why, the main reason why we do Mile High is where someone comes up against a board and says, well, don't you know that it's a standard of care that you only take care of a person with symptoms, and you would only take care of a person you want to take an x-ray on someone that doesn't have symptoms. Why would you do that? And you see these cases come up versus someone in Colorado can say, well, I know you think that way because you're on the board, but the state organization says that's a viable standard of care. It says it right here. So why would you try this person or, want to discipline their license if the state organization or an organization like the ICPA says, well, no, that is a standard of care to take care of a kid without symptoms, or maybe take an x-ray on a kid of the appropriate age, because there could be possibly some information on that would help the chiropractor take better care of this child, and that without that information, it may not provide what's needed, even though they don't have symptoms in that area. And this is the kind of thing that you see in chiropractic, because people didn't necessarily have a strong education in and understand philosophy, and they're really practicing as a glorified physical therapist, and then they're on state organizations or state boards, which it creates a problem, a huge problem. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think as a profession, we should actually take note of what medicine does really well, which is they have these subspecializations that don't say to one another, well, just because I focus on obstetrics, that doesn't mean that neurology has no value, right? Like recognize that, like, oh yeah, no, I choose to practice in manual therapy, physical therapy type of practice with athletic trainers and PTs and all this. That's how I want to do it. But that doesn't mean that the chiropractor down the street who focuses on family wellness is doing anything wrong. It just means they're choosing to practice in a different way. I think we should do a better job of working together and understanding that just because we do it our way doesn't make it the only right way.
Right.
There's tremendous value, and I've referred patients of mine to chiropractors who practice in those other models.
Right.
You know, and I think that's great because they do stuff that I just don't have that passion for, right?
Right.
We don't need to be
I've
all
done the same thing.
all
I've done the same
people.
thing. I've referred to other chiropractors
Yeah.
that, maybe do nutrition and actually don't focus on subluxation,
Yeah.
Other
Just
using-
because they're well adjusted doesn't mean they also don't need to make good choices in their lifestyle, right?
Right. So, or other chiropractic techniques than what I do, or
Exactly.
analysis
Yeah.
package, because I want to see if they could benefit from some other approach, and then we should do that more in our profession overall. And we would thrive more if we did that as a profession.
Absolutely.
So, which would be good. So, now with that, why are you excited being at Mile High this year?
You know, I remember the first time I came out to Mile High. It was the first event after COVID, I believe.
Oh yeah.
And I remember just that sense of like isolation and loneliness.
Mhm.
And I think it's hard because as chiropractors, most of us don't practice in large group practices. Most of us don't work in big clinical settings like hospitals or teaching clinics, right? We're out on these little islands and we're doing good work, but we're also fighting upstream without a lot of support most of the time. And so when we go to certain events, you go to some events because you need CE credits. You go to some events because you need to learn something new. You need to go to some events because you need to be inspired and uplifted and kind of re-energized.
Uh-huh.
You go to some events because you just want to hang out with your friends, right? And I think for me, Mile High has become like all of those together, right? There's CE available. There's amazing speakers with interesting clinical pearls that you can gain. There's incredible breakout sessions, which this year the breakout sessions are just, I mean, mwah. But there's also that connection with other chiropractors and that inspiration. There's hanging out with friends. There's all of these things together, and it's just such a unique environment, I think, within the profession. And I think it's so needed. And you've done a phenomenal job. Your entire team has. I know it takes a lot of people to make this work, but the vision that you've had for this is exactly what helped me after COVID, just like get re-inspired and reinvigorated. And I think it's it's why I continue to come back every year.
I gotta tell you, it's been a journey doing that, and I learned a lot during that, and I didn't realize how much people really liked being in community with other chiropractors.
Yeah.
And getting to speak to them and have their teams. I didn't realize that when we started it, but that was really what people thrive for. They really love top-notch speakers, which is like primary. But then I realized, they actually really want to also be in community and collaboration and connection, and that opens up their heart, or enlivens their heart for what they do. It makes them feel like they're with family. So, really important. If people want to get more involved with the ICPA, or maybe they don't even, they've never done like any of the educational classes, or that, there's a process to get a certification. Can you talk to that so people that need to know more about that?
Yeah, so there's different levels of participating, right? I'm have a Diplomate in Chiropractic Pediatrics through the ICPA. That is basically the culmination of the entire coursework, but there's also stages, right? So there's the if you take the Webster certification class, you're a member, you take the class, you pass the test, you can achieve Webster certification. This is what I like to I describe it as like the entry class to really understand the importance of perinatal care and some of the clinical aspects of Webster technique that are not just a do this and do that, right? There's actually a philosophical framework that goes into understanding the unique situations of pregnancy, that just because you learned the technique back in school, or maybe you learned from Larry himself, that has evolved. That class has continued to grow. Last year you had Pam Stone McCoy, who's one of the instructors. This year you've got Steph Libbs on the main stage, who's another one of the Webster instructors. Jen Santos, right? So you've got all of these incredible instructors. That would be the Webster. If you're so inspired that you say, wow, this is amazing, I want to learn more, there's a perinatal certification. This is a certification of a group of classes that are really focused more on pregnancy, not just the adjustment of pregnancy, but all of the other things that go on, whether it's perinatal, adjusting in labor, which Kristen Hosaka, who's going to be on the panel, teaches, postpartum care, right? That's the perinatal certification. Then you can go a little further and do the certification in pediatrics, right? That's where you dive into more of the classes that are focused on advanced techniques and concepts in adjusting kids. And then after you've completed all of the coursework, if you decide that you wanted to kind of take what you've learned, apply it into practice, and then demonstrate that knowledge, there's a review process for determining Diplomate status. But all of that can seem a little overwhelming at first. So my recommendation to anybody is, if you are at all interested in taking care of pregnant or pediatric populations, I would say that the bare minimum should be a Webster certification, right? Take that class, understand the philosophical, scientific, and artistic distinctions between perinatal care versus general chiropractic care, because pregnancy offers a really unique time in a person's life. And then, continue chipping away as you want to learn more and more. There's so many classes, electives. It's really, they've done such a great job with the curriculum over the years to expand that. But at a bare minimum, join the ICPA, recognize the importance of being part of a community that advocates for the training of chiropractors, the research of chiropractic family wellness, and public education, because we're all in this together, and we need to protect chiropractic worldwide. Yeah, protect, and also at the same time expand, right? 100%. Yeah, expand the reach of chiropractic, because there's no shortage of spines distorted that are not receiving the message of chiropractic and not receiving care. I think of what it would be like if more of the world experienced life through an optimal, healthy spine and nerve system, and the impact of that. So hey, that sounds like a big idea that BJ once had. Maybe, and it's a pretty darn big idea. Maybe one of the biggest I've ever heard of. The biggest, yeah. And I thank you for being such a vital contributor to that vision. And whatever, anytime I speak to you, Dr. Ian, I always feel so enlivened, because I feel like I'm speaking to someone who's just on the same wavelength, and that's always refreshing when you have that in chiropractic. So I've got to say, I appreciate that. I'm thrilled to have you coming out to Colorado. One of these times when you come out to Colorado, it's not professional. We have to make sure we see each other. Absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for your contributions. We look forward to seeing you on higher ground. Is there any last message you want to tell to chiropractors or chiropractic students? I would say this, get out to Mile High, September 26th to the 29th. It's a blast. We're going to have some fun. You'll get inspired. You'll get lit up. Let's go. Make sure you bring your assless chaps for Mile High Noon. Especially if you're skiing. So. Yeah. Get some sun on those cheeks. Yeah. All right. Well, keep changing spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic, Dr. Ian, and everybody. And we look forward to seeing everyone live. RiseUpToMileHigh.com.